You're listening to Energy Insiders, a weekly update on clean energy and climate policy with Renew Economy's editor Giles Parkinson and leading energy analyst David Leach. Energy Insiders is brought to you by Evergen, providing cutting-edge energy management software for battery optimisation, virtual power plants and distributed energy resources. And Pylon, helping solar installers and retailers design high-resolution solar proposals in minutes.
Hello and welcome to this latest episode of the Energy Insiders podcast. My name is Giles Parkinson. I'm the editor-in-chief of Renew Economy, and I'm going to get to say it. I'm also the editor of the EV Focus The Driven, which is very much in the news at the moment. And joining me, as usual, is ITK Principal David Leach. David, I trust you well. Have you gone out and bought another EV?
I haven't gone out. I must be the only person in the street that hasn't got one. At least I haven't had to repair a garage door this evening. Like some people I know.
Yes, well, it seemed to be working fine, and then it's come tumbling down.
But
yes.
Now you've got a great interview, not necessarily the biggest project on the books, but even if it's, 1.5 megawatts, it's still gone, and even if it took 14 years, it's a nice story, and it's a heck of a lot faster than any new wind farms in New South Wales, isn't it, really?
It is. Look, there's an awful lot of news to discuss this week, not just the EVs, which we look forward to talking about, the bailout for the Boyne Island Smelter to allow it to go green, and a few significant renewable energy projects and what's happening overseas. And it just sort of felt as a nice counterpoint to all the mayhem that and the depressing headlines that we wake up to each day, that we'd celebrate the official launch of the Goulburn community solar farm last Saturday, 1.4 megawatts, as you say, with a 4.4 megawatt hour battery. A long time in the running. This is in the electorate, what used to be.
Well, Giles, at 1.4 megawatts and 14 years, I'm thinking that's 100 kilowatts a year. Is that right?
Yes, but actually, when it started construction, it didn't take very long at all. It was all the hassles and the hurdles and things to get to, and the determination of a community group and why and how they did it. Anyway, I'm looking forward to the interview. We'll be back after the interview to talk about the news. But look, I really like you to listen to this interview. It's with Mhairi Fraser. She's from the Goulburn Community Solar Energy Group. And I talked to her earlier today. Mhairi Fraser, thank you very much for joining us.
I'm really happy to be here.
Look, it's such a good news story, and particularly in the world that we live in. We wake up to these ever horrifying headlines each day. And I was actually delighted when I read the news that last Saturday you finally officially launched the Goulburn Community Energy Solar Farm, which is a 1.4 megawatt solar facility, and I think it's got a 4.4 megawatt hour battery with it too.
That's right.
Yeah, a fantastic achievement because it's been so long in the making.
It has. It's been 12 long years. It started off, do you want me to tell you a little bit about how to...
Tell us everything.
So, look, we really owe the existence of this solar farm to Tony Abbott.
Look, another good story, and it's fantastic.
So, 2013 to 2016 or whenever he was around, he was just, attacking climate scientists, attacking science, the famous, climate change is crap stuff, dismantling a lot of the kind of government institutions that were supporting climate action and emissions reduction, and certainly really trying to get rid of the renewable energy target. And there were a lot of us in Goulburn that were furious, and we were frustrated, and a lot of us grandparents and parents, and really feeling like, well, what is going to happen to the future generations of humanity and, the more than human world, if we continue along a trajectory of reliance on fossil fuels. And so in 2014, the Community Power Agency held the first Australian Community Energy Congress in Canberra, and a few of us went. And that was a turning point because there were a few of us from a community association, and then there were also a couple of guys from a big construction company in Goulburn who were also really furious about what was happening. They're a carbon-intensive business, but they were doing everything they could to reduce their footprint. And we had a conversation. And we got back to Goulburn, we opened a bottle of red wine and we continued this conversation in a wider group. And we thought, why don't we build a solar farm? Can't be that hard, can it? Why don't we do it ourselves? Because the government's not going to step up at this point. So the construction company actually had some land available adjacent to the railway corridor and also the main entry into Goulburn. So it's actually in Goulburn City. It's not out on a farm paddock. It's in the city.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that because I used to go through Goulburn quite often, stopping at least near the train station to charge my electric vehicle. And I was just thinking I could probably almost see it from there.
Well, yes, on your way in Sydney Road, you look left,
Yep,
and there
it is. Oh, fantastic.
So they offered us land, and they had also done some preliminary DA stuff for another potential project that didn't get up on site. So offered us an enormous amount of help. In 2014, we ran a sustainability conference, and we we had people from CSIRO there. We had the first time Tesla was out, the car was out of Sydney. It was on display. We had an expo of electric vehicles, but we had a community energy event where we had speakers talking about the possibilities of community energy, and about 150 people, locals, turned up. And at that event, the New South Wales government representative, who was also there, announced the feasibility grants.
So they supported the initial feasibility grant.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we applied and we got $50,000 to explore feasibility.
So let's first push out to the local community. How did that go? Because, I mean, I guess you could describe it, it's a regional town, it's an agricultural region, it's reasonably conservative. Your local federal representative is now the leader of the leader of the Liberal Party. Angus Fraser, your local
Angus Taylor, thank you.
Angus Taylor, oh, sorry, God. And you're a Fraser. Oh, my God, I can't believe it. Yes, there was an English cricketer called Angus Fraser, and I always get the names confused.
Can I just say that Angus Taylor is no longer our local member due to boundary shifts. It's Kristen Bain.
Oh, there you
go.
So
we're very pleased.
But how was the response to the local community anyway? Because,
Look, yes, we can stereotype the regions, and we do often see a very conservative response to things. I think conservative sometimes means just slow to change or reticent to embrace completely new things. However, in Goulburn, it's a changing region. It's no longer riding the sheep's back. So it's looking at other ways for it to explore and to develop itself. And there's a lot of tree changes coming into Goulburn, and there's a lot of really good long-term Goulburn people who are committed to the region. So you're asking about locals. Well, one of the other things that we did for about 5 years prior to 2014 was to run a whole lot of events in Goulburn exploring sustainability. It was post-millennial drought. People were very depressed in Goulburn. We nearly ran out of water. And so our group kind of arose out of that with a kind of mission to get a conversation about sustainability happening in a soft way. So we were looking for projects, real-world projects that we could do that would get people interested in what was possible in Goulburn. And the first big project we did was we restored a wetland because water was so critical. So it was a symbol of rejuvenation. And Goulburn Wetlands is a much loved site in Goulburn now, but it shifted a lot of people's attention to this group that was able to pull a project like that off. 13 hectares of rubbish tip turned back into a wetland. And the same construction company were involved in that project. So we ran 3 sustainability festivals as well. So there was already, in a sense, a whole network of people who just needed to be galvanised, really. In terms of the wider population, I think we have continuously experienced really positive responses. And even to the solar farm, we had not one negative response from people surrounding the solar farm. We door-knocked everyone who had visuals on the solar farm. We had no objections. We think a little bit of political interference at times. in media, but on the whole, people were just curious. And so, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
What do you mean by political interference? Or just stories fed into the media which sort of detracted and things?
Yes, we had one really weird experience where all of a sudden this new local paper popped up, and it ran a front page story about all the members of the committee and how they were basically siphoning off money. And we were really alarmed at this, and so we ran a story countering it. But we also went to all of our supporters and explained the situation and said we thought that it was political interference. And again, no one in the support base, which at that stage was, well, we had a database of 1,500. So no one in that 1,500 came back with, oh, we're getting a bit edgy here. So the integrity of the people involved, I think, that was really embraced by the community, and people were very angry. They wrote to the paper, they wrote to council, very angry, and they withdrew. So we just wonder a bit about it.
So you got the funding for the feasibility study. What year was that, and why has it taken so long to deliver since then?
Okay, so 2014 we applied, 2015 we got it. It took a year to do the study. We presented that in 2016 to the community. 250 people, I think, turned up to that. John Hewson was there as a guest speaker, former Liberal Party leader. Lots of support. And we had demonstrated on paper, at least, that it was technically, economically and socially feasible, because socially feasible is as important as the other two. Then there were no other grants on offer. So for the next, that was 2016, the next 3 years we pursued big investor money to de-risk the project. And we also lobbied very hard the New South Wales government. We said, look, you've done the feasibility grant program, you have to follow it up with an infrastructure grant. And eventually, so in that time, we also had to keep the community engaged. That's a long time for people to stay keen. We asked people to give some sort of indicative pledges that they would commit if the solar farm did become a thing. And we knew that we had about $250,000 if people committed.
Right.
Which seemed like enormous.
Enormous money, yes, exactly right. But not to do the job.
No, not at all. So in 2019, finally, so we had to keep the community engaged. So we did things like we ran solar and battery bulk buy programs with, we engaged contractors and got them at cheaper rates. So we had to do all these things to keep people really pro-solar, pro the project. We had angel investors that kept topping us up so we could run these events and we could, so we had incredible support in that 3 years. Lobbied very, very hard. And eventually, 2019, the New South Wales government announced the regional community energy infrastructure grants. And there were 5 projects that were successful, and we got $2.1 million to build the solar farm with battery storage, and we had to match it. For it to be community owned, it had to be 51%. We had to raise. So we formed a co-op and put a prospectus out, and within 6 weeks we had $2.4 million. So we had more than exceeded the New South Wales government grant. That grant was really crucial because it did de-risk. It gave confidence.
Yeah, sure. And that's from 288 people, I think, and most of them are local. Yeah.
80% are local, but we have investors from Tasmania, from Queensland, from ACT and Sydney.
Okay. So you got the grant in 2019, early
2020.
2020. Oh, something else happened in 2020, I think.
2020.
Yes.
Exactly. 2020, COVID hit.
Yeah.
And everything shut down. So, we couldn't do anything much at all in that year. But we had the money, we had the investor money, so it just sat there, any interest, and we waited. But the impact of that as well was, there were multiple impacts. the workforce was severely affected, sort of nationwide, in all sorts of sectors. And once things started ramping up again, it was extremely hard to get contractors to do work. We weren't ready to do any building work at that stage, but we also that was one thing. The other thing was that the cost of component parts went through the roof.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I mean, even so.
So we had to
Yes.
recost the project.
Oh, no.
And constantly. And that was pretty scary stuff. And the other thing that emerged in that time that we were unaware of, and the New South Wales government was unaware of, was that the federal government had imposed a tax on government infrastructure grants. Again, one wonders, and it was particularly affecting community energy grants. So the New South Wales government was giving us a grant, and the federal government was taking 25% of it into their coffers. And the New South Wales government knew nothing about it when they gave us the grant. So we had to, and the other thing about that was we had to pay the tax upfront.
Oh, seriously?
Before we raised any revenue at all. So you can imagine the cash flow spreadsheets we were. When I say we, I wasn't, but the committee was working with constantly because we had local investor money. We were really accountable to people around us. So COVID sort of threw up a lot of things. And the impacts of COVID lasted for at least 2 years. And then we had to do the whole regulatory hurdle thing, which each hurdle took a very, very long time.
So what sort of hurdles are these? Is that sort of connection to the grid, approval,
Yes,
and all that sort of thing?
Yeah. Look, I'm probably not the best and the most expert to talk about the technicals, but yes, certainly we had to get permission to connect. Essential Energy had downgraded their staffing levels during COVID. They still haven't restored those levels. So getting staff to do that work was really difficult, even though they were fabulous. They really wanted to do the work. But with the expansion of renewable energy and the Hume link, there was a lot of demands on Essential Energy for work. We also had to do a lot of on-site studies because this was an old fuel depot. So it was a contaminated site and it was alongside the Mhairi River. So we had to have soil testing, and we had to have a whole lot of work done to hold any runoff on site so that nothing left the site. That proved to be quite an engineering feat, but all that work and those studies were done in the sort of 2 or 3 years following that, and each step was very, very slow. Each step was very, very costly. So back to the spreadsheets.
You literally had to watch the grass grow.
Well, that was another thing. So one of the things that Sydney Water required was that there was grass coverage, not weed. We had great weeds. We had weeds everywhere. But they wanted grass, and we had another mini drought around, I must have been 2022, 23. We spread seed, nothing happened. They wouldn't let anything progress until grass grew. So then we laid hessian on the whole site, for 2.2 hectares of hessian, and then seeded again into the hessian. It took a very long time, probably a year before any grass started to grow. Now, the problem with this strategy, I'm going on a bit too long, you edit this out, but is that we knew that once we started construction, there'd be trucks in there pulling up all of this. What was the point? But it was a regulation, we had to do that. So grass had to grow first. So we were really, planning to pull our hair out. But the good news was, as time went on, when there had been a component price hike, now there was a kind of flattening of that.
Yes.
And the efficiency of panels was unbelievable. And we were also offered a battery double the size for not much more than the cost of the battery we already had. We had to go back to investors and the government to see if we could get another 400,000 to get that bigger battery. But we were able to do that. So there was a kind of benefit in having that length of time because of the
Yeah.
efficiency gains we got.
There you go. And so construction actually started in what year?
2025.
2025. My God. Okay.
Yeah.
And now it's done. Well, it's not a huge project, so it would be done in, once you build
Once
these
they
things.
started, it was really quick.
Yeah. Once it started, it was really quick. It's just getting to that starting line is the hard bit. So look, it's up and running now.
Well,
I think
it's
it's going through its commissioning process, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So it'd be
everything's going well.
it'll be fully online very soon. What's going to be its purpose? What do the community owners get out of it? How's that going to operate?
So the farm is owned by the cooperative, and the cooperative has 290 members. And being a cooperative is very different to being a company. So we have mutual interest at heart, and we are co-owners of this farm. So one of the things that they get out of it is owning a facility, but also having this mutual interest in renewable energy. And the co-op can go on and do other things. And, there's already questions about, well, what next? So that's a fantastic thing. So what I'm talking about really is the first thing we've really built is social capital through this long process and forming a cooperative. And social capital is what we're going to need increasingly in communities as we hit harder and harder times. The world is fracturing. The world is in a very difficult space. Carbon emissions are not coming down, they're going up. Climate change is here and getting and very much in evidence. So building social capital is a really important part of this project. Secondly, it's an economic, it's an economic win for Goulburn. 80% of people who are investors live in Goulburn, so money circulates in Goulburn. They will start hopefully getting a dividend at the end of this year. We are negotiating a power purchase agreement at this stage because we explored being a retailer and retailing into Goulburn, but it was honestly just too difficult. So we're going down the PPA route. And that will secure, we'll fix a price for a period of time, which will give our investors certainty.
Okay, and they get a dividend, and then community owners, doesn't matter what size, what they put in, everyone's individual just has one vote.
That's exactly right. So there can be no takeovers. There can't be any, vested interests that come in and take over the whole thing. Everyone has the same vote. The investors have already voted to also put aside a percentage of the revenue or the profit of the solar farm each year into a community fund. And we are still exploring what is the best use of that fund, but we want it to be in the renewable energy space and also address energy inequality. So we're still formulating what that will look like. So that's another benefit to Goulburn.
What would your advice be to other communities considering a similar project? Because it is such a wonderful project, but you've had to sort of dig in and go along hard course. I mean, you got it built very quickly, but it took a decade and more than a decade, 13 years to actually begin construction.
If you're going to embark on a big renewable energy this is, big for a community, renewable energy project, build the social capital first. Don't think, it's easy. It's not. And it needs ever widening circles of support within a community and beyond. So beginning to build those is really important, plugging into organisations like Community Power Agency, Hepburn Energy, us for advice and support. Also really know that this is a long-term project, and have you got the leadership smarts and the leadership kind of emotional resilience to go through it? Have you got a really cohesive leadership team that has credibility locally? Because I think that was really important. We didn't have any falling out in our team. And we had one person who left because they wanted a company, not a cooperative, but they left on good terms. That was fine. And I think that's quite important because you have to be able to manage anxiety and you have to be able to manage conflict, often with contractors or the government or whatever, and be able to be steady. And you need to have a board as well of really, really, really smart people and really calm people. So we have Andrew Bray from Realigns, who's our chair, And I describe Andrew as, a calm centre in a wild storm. So people like that. So get really good people.
These are all great recommendations, not just for sort of managing a community and a community project, but also possibly the world.
Well, that's exactly right. And to really have a purpose in mind. What is your purpose? And what's the fire in your belly? I referred to Tony Abbott. Honestly, if things had been swimming along pretty smoothly, we wouldn't have built a solar farm. We needed a match. We needed the fire in the belly to get off the couch. So if there's something in your region, it may not be renewable energy, it might be a smaller renewable energy project, but you've got a fire in your belly about it, and you really want change, go for it. Just get off the couch and go for it.
And you hinted there might be sort of further things afoot. Any suggestions, or just wait and see?
Look, at the moment we want a rest. Not sure. Maybe something in batteries. I'm not sure. But we're just kind of looking at that. We don't want to stop now. We've learned so much. And as I said earlier, the world is not in a good place. It's not a time to put your feet up. It's a time to get the boots on, wind up, push up your sleeves, find your tribe and get on and do it.
Yeah. And as you say, the future of this world sort of relies so heavily on community and social capital. So, yeah. Well, look, Mhairi, congratulations. It's a wonderful story, particularly in such a crazy world, and well done. And thank you very much for coming on the Energy Insiders podcast.
Oh, it's been a delight, Giles. Thank you.
And that was Mhairi Fraser from the Goulburn Community Solar Farm Group. We'll be back in a moment.
G'day, Alex Carey here, proud ambassador for GoodWe. The GoodWe ESA 3060 all-in-one commercial solution is available now from GoodWe wholesalers. With a massive 50 kilowatt hours of the battery eligible for the federal rebate, it's the perfect solution for small businesses. The commercial energy storage range from GoodWe is growing, with more models launching soon. Visit goodwe.com.au for more information or contact the local GoodWe team.
You're listening to the Energy Insiders podcast with Giles Parkinson and David Leach. David, look, I thought it was a really cheerful story, uplifting story about, you've got 700 people in there doing it for a reason, overcoming all sorts of hurdles.
Think global, act local. This was
exactly
true when it was said, and it remains one of my favourites.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And the really important points about social capital. And I sort of think that, as we, I think, discussed in the podcast, is sort of the hope of the world lies in local communities, because God knows with the caliber of our global governments. Anyway, let's get back into the broader world. Should we go to Boyne Islands first, or do you want to talk about EVs?
I thought we'd start with the gas statement of opportunities, Giles, which we produced today. Just observing, I think you noted that the demand for gas, as forecast by IEMO, and particularly for power generation, is way less than they were saying even a year ago. Surprise, surprise. When you couple with that, with the fact that Transgrid's ordering some batteries, it doesn't maybe won't need as many synchronous condensers. Anyone would think the people that come and talk on this podcast actually did have a clue after all.
Yeah, well, you never know. Yes. There was another battery joined the grid in Queensland this week. Broadsound solar battery hybrid, Iberdrola. That takes the number of capacity of new batteries to well over 4 gigawatts. A lot. I mean, and more coming down. They're all just sort of charging down.
It's interesting, Giles, when you look at it. IEMO publishes some statistics on the battery state of charge, and I've set up some of my alert systems so that I see every morning they run down below 5%, and then they charge back up in the afternoon before running down in the evening peak. So with these smaller batteries, running them twice a day seems to be the go, and you want to make sure they're empty.
And at what point does your phone ring?
The phone, doesn't ring, Giles. I get SMSs for electricity prices and stuff, and I get an email at 12 o'clock telling me what's happening in the day to prices and gas prices, and another one at 7 o'clock. So anyway,
devotion to duty, David. It's wonderful.
Anyone would think I was a nerd, but now look, I wanted to get to the point here. We talked about the gas statement of opportunities, and the point is always about how we can get more gas into the system, even though it turns out we don't really need it. And at the same time, we go on and talk about Boyne Island Smelter, where the Minister for Handouts has been handing out a couple of $1 billion to that smelter, and that follows the significant handout to the fairly useless copper smelter at Mount Isa, owned by Glencore, one of the world's great renewable haters. So, the federal Labor government, dear old Minister for Handouts, Tim Ayres, has no trouble giving this money to the Queensland government. And the Queensland government would like to spit in his face, no doubt, but they take the money and then do absolutely nothing to help anyone else with their electricity or their gas. And at the same time, David Crisafulli's got to run off to northern Queensland to deal with the floods and things that are going on there. And no doubt, thinking about the 2032 Olympics and how much fun that's going to be for the Queenslanders. But let's not worry about
yes,
that.
and they've cut their emissions targets for that. So the emissions targets laid out for the 2032 Olympics have been cut officially by the
Giles, when you've got a target that you're going to miss, far better to cut the target.
When you've got a target that you're not even going to try reaching, then...
But the point I wanted to get to, the more serious point, is that just handing out money to Boyne Island Smelter, effectively to Rio shareholders, for the sake of a few jobs, is...
Yeah.
Yes, relatively few. Employment in the health union is way greater than the employment at Boyne Island, direct and indirect. 75,000 people are employed on the Barrier Reef, related to tourism industry. That's what needs the handouts. But coming back to the situation that we do know about, which is gas and aluminium and smelters, rather than just handing out the money to Boyne Island, a plan, there's been various Gladstone plans that people have put out from Climate Works and lots of studies done on the area, none of which it seems to me are really going into effect. I've had a hobby horse for years and years since it was first explained to me and since I worked on it about getting rid of the gas that's used in the digesters, in making the alumina. I think Giles, that to make aluminium, you get bauxite from somewhere. That's the rock, and then you put it in a big bowl of chemicals and wait till it melts a bit, and then you kind of heat it somehow or other a little bit, and out of that comes the alumina that you then put through the smelter and electrolyse. Right, so there's two or three processes, but and it's big business in Australia. Even the aluminium consumes still about 8-9% of the electricity. And the alumina uses all this gas that could be electrified through heat processes if someone would only take it seriously. And I just personally think that the Minister for Handouts could have done a bit better in asking Rio to actually do something useful rather than just paying them money, a bribe, to keep the smelter open.
Well, a bribe or not. Okay, that's a really strong view. I agree. I don't actually have an issue with the $2 billion handout, which I think actually probably came from a mix of federal and state governments. So it was kind of interesting that the state government, which has been decrying renewables, is now sort of giving out money so they can build some more. I understand why they want to keep that smelter going. I do agree in a major city like Gladstone. I do agree that it should be tied with some of those technology changes that you talked about. But I'd also point out that that Boyne Island smelter has long been subsidised, as most other smelters have been when they were using coal-fired generation. And I think in the end, the size of the subsidy for this smelter to run on wind and solar, and it'll be the first in the world basically to do that, is going to be much less than anyone's ever received.
Well, Giles, sorry.
And I just think that's going to be a great flagship project, not just for Australia, but for the world, because we keep,
It will be up to a point, but there are two further points where I really think that Chris Bowen and Tim Ayres could have thought and tried to talk to the Queensland government, could have thought even harder about it. The first is that the Boyne Island smelter needs firming because the pots really don't want to be turned off for more than an hour or two. And so you got that from the Gladstone Coal Power Station, which is still slated to close around about, I think, 2028 or 2029.
Yeah, 2029.
And as I understand it, the firming was going to come from the Barumba pumped hydro project.
That's not going to be built in time.
Well, that's probably not going to be built on time. So now it'll come from the rest of Queensland's coal-fired power stations. But the point I think I wanted to make is that firming one aluminium smelter costs a lot more than firming the per unit of electricity. You need a lot more firming than you do to firm the whole of the Queensland load.
And I suspect that's exactly why they've got the subsidy, David. Rio Tinto made it quite clear when they announced those huge gigawatt scale wind and solar and battery hybrid projects that, this is 70%, 80% of our bulk energy use. We've still got an issue with firming. We're going to talk to the governments, and I think this is the answer they got. So I think that's going to help them get over their line.
Yes, but then you're going to have the same inefficient outcome at Tomago, where Snowy's going to ride to the rescue, and we're going to have the same issue at all the data centres. And the point, can I just just finish this one thing one more time? If you put them together, each could get a lower cost by having a bigger portfolio that they draw on, because you probably won't need firming at exactly the same time in Sydney as you do at Boyne Island. Similarly, the wind in New South Wales won't blow at exactly the same time. It's well known as it blows in Queensland. So you would end up with a lower overall average cost. And this is where I think everyone could think a lot harder about it. But anyway.
Yeah, wouldn't it be sort of great if all the sort of the big corporates could sort of think, sort of generously along those lines and sort of make plans and think about the common good and things like that. But they just have this market power, this ability to have this great idea, do something, get halfway there, and then say, oh, well, we've done to that. You guys are going to be in the shit, pay us some more money, or, underwrite it and things like that. And we've seen that with the way the big utilities are operating with their coal-fired power stations.
Charles, do we want to get onto another edifying topic, the crack spread?
Oh, God, David. You better tell us very quickly what it is, otherwise I'm taking it out.
The crack spread is the margin that a refiner gets over by selling the products it produces, diesel or petrol, over the oil that goes in. It's a very common sort of gross margin type calculation. So the oil comes in and you put it through reformers, which basically heat different bits of it up to different temperatures, and the other products bleed off. That's why it's called you crack the oil down into its constituent products. Now, the thing is that I've discovered this week, and I must say that oil keeps for a lot longer than diesel does. But oil keeps essentially forever, whereas diesel keeps at best for a year. And low sulfur diesel, sulfur's a preservative, whatever its harmful things, it keeps for less long. So when we closed all our refineries, we essentially became more dependent on imports of diesel from Singapore and from South Korea. Now, it turns out that Singapore gets most of its oil through the Straits of Hormuz, and it's a light sweet oil. So all of a sudden, our contracts with Singapore are not very useful because Singapore can't refine as much as it wants to, and therefore its crack spread is poor because its fixed costs are very high. So it hasn't been all that keen to run anyway, facing these force majeure items. And so that's why we're turning back more to South Korea, which has a very big oil reserve that they can release into the market. But the bigger point, of course, is what it's revealed is that we don't have refineries. I don't think the right answer is to bring the refineries back. I don't think the right answer is to pollute everyone by making high sulfur diesel. The right answer, of course, is to electrify transport. I mean, obviously, consumers are voting with their dollars, and the anecdotal evidence, well, you would know better than me, is that lots and lots of electric cars are going to get sold. But the big returns, the big money that Australia can make, the big productivity growth, the big security benefit is by electrifying long-distance transport of goods.
Yeah, well, there's going to be a conference in Canberra along that very line, and I can't remember the exact name of the conference, but it's decarbonisation of freight, I think it is.
The Freight Forwarders Conference on Monday.
Freight Forwarders Conference. Okay, that rings a bell. Anyway. And there's been the first long haul electric truck delivery from Sydney to Canberra by New Energy Transport this week. Which includes, of course, Daniel Bleakley, who you interviewed in this podcast a few weeks ago. So that's interesting.
Not just me; he's been interviewed by everyone that he meets on the street, as far as I can tell. No,
that's because he's got something interesting to say.
He does,
a product which might actually save the farm, which is really good. Look, I don't know much about this sort of the diesel freight thing, apart from the fact that there's not much around, and we really should have more. and there's actual potential for it now. So maybe this is the breakthrough. I think it certainly has been the breakthrough for the consumer electric car market. I just think because these prices are going to stay pretty high for months, I think we're going to see some extraordinary numbers for the month of March. It could be in the 20s. I mean, maybe even the high 20% in terms of market share. Matt Canavan even declared his love for Teslas, but said he didn't want to buy one because about the depreciation. But you should check out the sort of depreciation on his fossil cars at the moment. They've all petrol and diesel cars sort of online and car sales at the moment. It's just sort of plunging.
So I think, yes, people in the city will switch faster, but I think they're the less affected ones at the end of the day. Lots of public transport in the city. Where I think the psychological shift will probably happen is in the regions where people, have been basically not really on board with EVs in a big way. But when they're facing petrol and diesel costs over $3 a litre, and you've got to pay your school fees at night, and for fertiliser that's very hard to get all of a sudden, you start to think a lot harder about it.
Yeah, no, well, it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting to note, I think you were doing a sort of a long drive this weekend, and I sort of joked to you the other day that you'll probably be sold on the road, and there was an article in, I think it was the SMH today, saying you may well be, because a lot of people are giving up on their sort of normal Easter holidays, and it's just a bit of a turnaround, really, because, I think everyone sort of talked about EVs and range anxiety and charger anxiety, and now you find the petrol and diesel drivers having pretty much the same issue, one about cost and two about any petrol station will be open when they get there.
It's hard not to be snide about it. Now, another quite positive announcement in the market you probably know as much about as the next person, Giles, is West Australian Wind, where I think there's been some positive news this week. Yeah,
look, Synergy, the WA government actually wrote contracts, long-term PPAs for just over a gigawatt of wind. There's the Alinta, I think it's Mhairi, is it? Wind project, and I think there's some others. It's been seen as a bit of a breakthrough moment in WA. I mean, WA is sort of... It's a really interesting grid. It's a nice, big, isolated grid. It's got, amazing levels of rooftop solar and consumer energy resources and innovations happening there. It's building big wind farms and solar farms has always been a struggle. Over the last 3 years, they've done extraordinary things with big battery storage. The two Collie batteries, both over 2,200 megawatt hours, the two biggest in Australia, and there's more on their way, probably another dozen.
I think they've got some transmission issues in WA, just like there's transmission issues in Texas, just like, it's quite funny, isn't it? Anyone would think that these markets bore some basic similarities after a while, and that if you had half a brain, you'd look at what was going on in someone else's backyard so you could get ahead of it.
Yeah. Anyway, look, the significance of this is that the state-owned generator is actually just sort of, or retailers just sort of stepped in and said, okay, we'll sign these contracts. You go build the bloody things and we'll buy the output. So that's a good thing. And they need bulk energy because they've got their coal-fired power stations closing at the end of the decade. They seem to have enough batteries, if not now, then very, very soon.
And they've got great resources, plenty of sun and plenty of wind.
Well, it's the same old story. I think
the resource they're missing is rain, isn't it? It doesn't have rain in, as we heard from Matthew England at the beginning of the year.
No, yes. They've got a category 5 cyclone going down at the coast at the moment. So that may part the hair of a few people. And no, it's up to 5. So it's about 275 kilometres an hour. So that could cause some damage. And we wish all the people who may find themselves in a path. Hey, look, just one other thing I wanted to mention, because there was a bit of press, including on our website this week, about the sort of the Trump handout to Total to not build its offshore wind farm in the US, and it sounded like quite extraordinary. But I actually looked at the details of that. Basically, Total paid it was 1.3 billion Australian. They paid that fee originally to the US government for the license to build that project. And obviously Trump has said, well, you're not going to build it and we'll give you your license fee back with the condition that you put that same money into gas infrastructure and investment in the US. So basically they're saying, well, here's that money back, forget about the wind farm, put it into fossil fuel projects. And I just thought that should just be underlined, because it is not the most extraordinary thing that the Trump administration is doing, but it's just another sign of the times. And I wanted to make absolutely clear about that.
Yes, well,
Nothing more to say on that one.
I don't have anything more to say. I feel sympathy for the 50 greater than 50% of Americans who probably have a wonder why they're getting the shit kicked out of them every time they meet someone.
Yeah.
And the other announcement, I think, Giles, we're running out of time, is that Victoria's now announced it's 3 hours of solar. The only problem is, do they actually have 3 hours of solar?
Oh, that's a cutting comment, David. Well, they say that Melbourne, you have 4 seasons in one day, so the 3 hours of free solar comes in the summer, which can arrive either in the morning, the lunchtime, or the afternoon. Look, it's interesting that so the regulator, the federal energy minister, asked the main regulator to set this in motion, but it actually covers New South Wales, South East Queensland, and South Australia. Victoria has its own regulator, so they've basically just sort of matched that, but they sort of come out first with those issues. It's going to be interesting to see how many actually do take it up. Probably not people with rooftop solar as it is, probably not people with battery storage. If it can be found, if it can help people, particularly those disadvantaged, particularly those who can actually take advantage of throwing a whole bunch of load between 11 or 2 or whatever the hours are at that time. I mean, the claim savings are $1,000 a week, but that's going to be a year, but that's going to be elusive for many people. Still, and I know many people disagree with me, I actually think this is a good thing because I think it changes the conversation about retail bills, because the big question about renewables is, why aren't my retail bills coming down?
Well, they are, Charles, a little bit.
Yeah, but you talk to the person out on the street there and they're not seeing that. And
it
they
takes
will
time to filter through, and it's a perception. But I mean, the regulator has clearly signalled lower bills this year.
Oh, and I'm sure the retailers will be doing their damnedest best to sort of beat the regulator and cut their prices even further. Sorry,
I think that the price cuts will flow through over time. I think that part of the market's still reasonably competitive, and what happens when the prices go down, the small retailers are able to attract lots of customers, and then as soon as there's a problem, the small retailers go to the toilet and the customers go back to the big retailers. That's the way the market works.
Well, I guess it is, yeah. Anyway, look, I just like I just like the idea of it. I like the atmospherics of it. I don't think it's going to benefit as many people as it is, but I just think it's a good policy to have. And look, some parts of this energy sort of system are slow to transition, and if this helps them along the way, then I'm all for it. I know some people haven't been innovative and done it, but I don't mind if the others need to kick up the pants.
So, I plan to do some more work on transport for a while because, one, I think it's a great topic, and two, because you kind of run out of things to talk about what's going on in the NEM. There's still no new projects being announced of any significance except batteries here and there. And guess what? The batteries need some energy to actually charge up. So, it's becoming quite serious. The transmission is going to be built well before the wind farms, right? So a couple of years ago, we were talking about no transmission. There's still some issues in transmission around the Sydney reinforcement loop and around V&I West. And to be fair, once you get to Victoria, it's a different conversation. But in New South Wales, the transmission, most of it's going to be there for absolute sure, but no one's announcing a wind farm. Or a solar farm, even.
No, they're not. And that's why the WA move this week was reasonably significant, and why we have a problem in most of the states in the rest of Australia, because we depend on privately owned gentailers to do the right thing, and they're building batteries. They're not building wind or solar or showing the slightest bit of interest of doing that anytime soon.
Yeah, and, I suspect Eraring would actually probably quite like to close it's making some money, but there's a risk, that prices will go down and they'll need a subsidy, and a lot of things to be sorted out, and they'd like to move forward. Once a business makes a decision and wants to get on with it. I mean, sometimes underestimated, I think, the corporate culture and the employees. That's where I think Rio and BHP, who've got chairmen these days and CEOs who are very conservative compared to a couple of years ago. That's where I think in the long run it actually costs them in the corporate culture. So I think Origin, Frank Calabria, probably recognises that, the same as Damien Nix does, and they'd like to get on with it, but it requires the developers to come to the party as well, and the finance to be there, which we talked about a year ago. It's like a lot of billions of dollars, like $3 or $4 billion a gigawatt. And we need like 5 of them, just as pull a number straight out. It's $20 billion. Well, let's go. I mean, we've got to do it, right? What is it? It's coming up to Easter 2026, Charles.
That's right. Well, maybe that'll be a Good Friday present. Yeah, we probably need more developers, a bit like Tag Energy, which started building Golden Plains wind farm, the biggest wind project in Australia, and without any PPAs. And as soon as it starts getting built, they'll end PPAs. So.
It's blindingly obvious there'll be a market for the project if it's built. I think that's just completely obvious. But anyway, I'm not either building it or paying for it. So to be fair, that's an easy opinion to have. Giles, have we got any more value add?
I don't think so. I think we've exhausted our shallow levels of value add today.
The cynic might say, have we got any value add?
Well, the cynic may well say that. So might some listeners. Anyway, if they've lasted this long. If you have lasted this long, we do appreciate it. I hope in particular you enjoyed the interview with Mhairi Fraser from the Goulburn Community Solar Farm. I thought it was a great little interview, and I've actually really enjoyed the discussion with you, David, about Boyne Island and EVs and diesels and crack spreads and God knows what else. So thanks to you. Thanks, of course, to our sponsors, Evergen and Pylon. We'll be back with another episode of the Energy Insiders podcast again next week. Bye for now.
Energy Insiders was brought to you by Evergen, the market-leading renewable energy software business that optimises residential and commercial solar and battery systems. Evergen enables large numbers of systems to operate as a single fleet, so network operators can use them as a virtual power plant, generating significant value for consumers, network operators, and the energy system as a whole. Evergen software is powering the energy system of the future. Energy Insiders was also brought to you by Pylon. Pylon provides easy-to-use solar design software for installers and retailers with pay-as-you-go pricing, no monthly cost and no lock-in contracts. Join Australia's top solar companies who trust Pylon to design high-resolution, CEC-ready solar proposals.